Let's go. Hello, everyone. Welcome to this new episode of Politixing, episode 5, titled "He, Elon, is just a Nazi." This is my very simple thesis that I'll try to convince you of, and it is that restated. It's simply that Elon Musk is at, at least a white supremacist, and at worst a Nazi. But in order to make that case, I need to introduce you, or I need to posit a very simple principle that I think most people will grant me, and it is that within a free, largely liberal society, and by liberal here I mean a society where people's liberty is of the and the preservation thereof is paramount, right? Very important. So a society such as the United States is an example of that. So within such a society, obscure ideologies will seldom be proclaimed publicly by those that adhere to them. So what do I mean by obscure ideologies? I mean ideologies such as fascism, white supremacy, right? Like you can think of your KKK member or something. And the proclamation of such the public adherence to such ideas in the society, if they are permitted at all, because we know that some liberal societies do not allow the expression of certain ideologies, right? So, for example, in France, you cannot be a Holocaust denier. It's illegal, right? So, to the extent that they do allow the expression of such ideologies, the social cost that will be carried by the person that would publicly adhere to these ideologies will be super consequential, will be enormous, will be hefty, right? So this is just the plain basis that I need that I need to be granted in order to make my case. And obviously, the corollary to that sort of premise is that we shouldn't necessarily expect that fascists or white supremacists or the likes would publicly admit that they are fascist and white supremacist and so on. So this is the basis that I think is very straightforward, right? So obviously you could see where I'm going with it, because I'm going to argue that Elon Musk is one of those closeted white supremacists and Nazis, even possibly, because he stands to lose a lot, right? Obviously, because of his social and economic position, we can easily deduce that he stands to lose a lot. So he's been saying a lot of stuff, adopting a lot of positions that just, to me, make it clear that he is someone that believes in those ideas, but cannot publicly admit that he believes in those ideas. And in a little bit, in a little while, I'm gonna give a few examples of those ideas. But you could clearly see from the position, some of the positions that he's espoused publicly recently, that this is only somebody that subscribed to some of the tenets of the white supremacist ideologies would even believe, let alone publicly state those opinions, right? And this leads me to my second premise, which is that the best way to figure out within the context of such a society, right? Like, we're not talking about a society such as Nazi Germany, where adopting such positions is not only non-costly at all in terms of social and economic privileges, but that it might even be within a society that is not a liberal society. It might, I suppose, in those obscure ideologies might even be rewarded, right? But the moment we recognize that we are not in that society, in such a society, right, like such as Nazi Germany, blah blah blah, the best way to figure out, in my opinion, whether somebody espouses dark, obscure ideologies is to, first of all, it's in one, not relying on an admission from them, right? But second, and very importantly, the best way to figure out whether someone is a follower of such ideologies is to identify the building blocks of their system of thoughts, right? Of their ideology, right? And see if it overlaps with some of the core ideas and core premises of those obscure ideas, right? So, if I could kind of give like a sort of analogy here, it would be, or an example, it would be the linear algebra. I'm realizing that I'm talking about linear algebra and mathematics, but for those of you that can follow, in linear algebra, you have the concept of a vector space, right? And so a vector space is basically, like, you can imagine a space made of vectors, right? And there's the concept of a vector, or of the basis of the vector space. So every vector space has a basis. So meaning that so basically they form like the matrix of the vector space, and every vector that belongs to that said vector space is in some way a combination. So basically a manipulation of those basis vectors, right? So every vector that belongs to those vectors owe their existence to some manipulation of the basis, to the basis of that vector space. I think I could have thought of I can think of of an easier example, or metaphor to approach it. So I guess I could give the example of the colors, right? You can think of the set of all colors, and every color in the world, that can be perceived with the human eye, is some combination of red, green, and blue, right? The fundamental colors, right? So every color, so you can think of the set of all color as a vector space, and red, green, and blue being the basis of that vector space. So every element of that vector space, that is every element of the set of all possible colors, that is every color, to speak more simply, is a combination of those three colors. So basically that's the idea. So similarly, fascism, white supremacy, and those obscure ideologies, they have some fundamental beliefs, right? So for example, like, there was a hierarchy, the belief of a hierarchy among men, and that hierarchy not only describes the difference in levels of skills when it comes to certain things, but they are innate, right? They cannot be changed. So there exists a hierarchy among men that cannot be overcome. So for example, if you belong to one of the lesser races, no matter what you do, you might not be, you are not worth as much as somebody that belongs to the superior races, right? So, for example, that's an idea, right? That forms one of the bases, and there are others, right? I mean, I'm sure most of us are familiar with them. So those bases, what are we likened to the bases, or in linear algebra? They can combine in some sort of capacity to create a system of thought, right? So you can combine, for example, the idea that there is a hierarchy of men, at the top of which, obviously, you would place whatever is your favorite ethnicity or whatever with some other obscure ideas, right? So for example, the idea that certain groups of people are inherently drawn to some vices, right? So, for example, that the Jews are drawn to uh, um, um, greed, for example, and you can combine that with some other ideas, and then at the end you have, for example, Nazism, right? Um, so I think so I'm trying to make the point here that um, every ideology, right, is a combination of some basic premises, right? And surely those obscure ideologies, what I'm calling obscure ideologies, I cited, for example, white supremacism, and Nazism. They do not. They do also follow these rules. So, to tie it with my overall demonstration, if you want to show that somebody is a white supremacist, for example, I don't think it's necessary to wait until they say it, right? Because they might never say it because of that first premise that I laid out. That is that they know that they live in a liberal society, and that in such a society, if you if you publicly espouse those ideas, then you're gonna pay a cost, and they might not be willing to pay that cost, especially when they have a lot to lose by paying that cost. So my point is that if you, because you cannot always expect from them that they're going to tell you that they are a white supremacist or a Nazi, you should look for the building blocks of some of those ideas, of some of the ideas that they allow themselves to publicly espouse, right? And see how much it overlaps with the core ideas of some of those dark ideologies, right? So that is that is basically what I was trying to come to build as a premise before we start looking at some of Elon Musk's publicly espoused ideas. So now we can just start to cite a few examples, and we can see why only a person that believes in some of those core ideas of those dark ideologies can espouse. So we're gonna go with Exhibit A, his speech in front of the AfD. So, in case you don't know, the AfD is the far right German party. I know. Another one, right? So, in front of the AfD. So, if you remember, at the time, I think a few days or weeks before that, I may be wrong on the exact timing, but it was shortly after the Donald Trump win in the U.S. election, and yeah, I think at that time the far right was riding high. So yeah, so the AfD, that far right party in Germany, had a sort of rally, and they invited Elon Musk to speak on at their rally. And he obviously said a lot of things during that speech. I'm not gonna talk about the entirety of the speech, but I'm gonna draw your attention to a particular part of that speech, which had to do with the German guilt about World War II. Oh my god! I mean, to me, it sounds like it's self-evident, right? So, what did he say? What did he have to say in particular about the German guilt concerning the events of World War II, right? And basically, he made the point that, like, those things that happened, those horrible things happened a long time ago. Germany shouldn't be continuing to feel guilty about it. The German citizens of today shouldn't be having to pay for the sins of their forefathers and stuff like that. So, I mean, I would ask you the question. So, first of all, what is the main reproach made to the German society about their behavior during World War II? Right? Obviously, it's the Holocaust, right? Like, obviously, it's the concentration camps. Obviously, it's the mass execution of groups of people simply because they belong to categories of people like ethnic groups defined by ethnicity or handicap, perceived handicap, I should specify, and so forth. So, because when we talk about the horrors of World War II, I mean, obviously we talk about the military horrors, but at that time, I mean, a lot of people kind of gave in to this sort of practices, right? I mean, atrocities are bound to happen during the war, right? When we talk about what happens on the military field, right? But when we talk about the treatment of civilians, well, the German and also the Japanese, but they are not the only ones, were their actions particularly stand out by their cruelty and the arbitrary manner with which the victims were chosen, right? So, and I think there's no more eloquent example of that than the Holocaust, right? And there, I believe, is where the German guilt about World War II is concentrated, right? Like, we are not really, when we talk about the guilt of the Germans about World War II, we are not really talking about the kind of weapons they used on the battlefields, right? The chemical weapons, the biological weapons, or so forth. We are talking about the systematic ways, the systematic weapons they used against civilians, chosen on an arbitrary basis, right? And I mean, you almost want to ask yourself, I mean, from the moment we admit that those actions were wrong, which, I mean, nobody disputes, including um, Elon himself, though he doesn't even go as far as acknowledging that those actions were bad. He just he completely skips the question of whether those acts were good or bad, right, moral or not, and he just keeps to yeah, that happened a long time ago. We should completely forget about that, right? Like stop making it a big deal, which is first of all wrong on so many levels, right? Because I mean, what is the point of studying history otherwise, right? I mean, I would assume that if you're a person that involved in politics, that studying history, which includes talking about the morality or the immorality of certain acts committed in the past, would be very important. But apparently not. But anyways, so you want to ask yourself, well, who would be bothered? Like, why would it bother him that the study and the description of the Holocaust, right? Why would that bother him that that those things remain a big deal, right? Because I mean, Germany has a very long history, a history that spans decades. I mean, centuries. Sorry, that was a nice little that was a nice little mistake. Mistake. I guess you could argue that decades are included in centuries, but it's better to talk about centuries, more precise. Anyways, but I mean, obviously, we know that all of Germany's history is not reduced to World War II, right? If you bought a book on German history, it would probably be a very thick book, a very large book. Uh, and yes, of course, the World War II chapter would be one of the most important chapters, but obviously we know that's not all of Germany's history, right? But you want to ask yourself, why who what is the type of person that would condense Germany's history to World War II and that would insist that Germany's that chapter of Germany's history be depleted of its moral components, right? Obviously, that is somebody that has some sort of sympathy for the Nazis, right? I mean, let's just say it, like only a person that has sympathy, that feels sympathy, some sort of sympathy to the Nazis, would be bothered by the fact that the World War II chapter of German history is one made a big deal out of, and two be a source of guilt for contemporary Germans, right? I mean, I don't see any other explanation, right? And I think that him speaking to the at a meeting of a far right party and invoking that memory in that fashion, right, as something that's right, as in like that's enough. Enough has been enough of a big deal has been made out of that chapter. Let's move on. Again, only a person that has some sympathy towards the Nazis would do or say something like that, right? And uh, on that, I will move to Exhibit B, which is a more recent speech that he made at during some sort of video conference, and I mean that speech is even more straightforward, right? Whereas the first example almost demands that a certain leap be made, although in my opinion it's not that much of a leap, right? It's to me it's a logical it's a leap powered by logic. But in this case, I mean, this was just a blood and soil argument, right? And I'm referring to his little demonstration on demographics, right? By the way, there are something. One of the strange things about Elon is that for years now he's made a big deal out of population collapse. Well, that's strange. That's a strange worry to have, right? As Bill Burr, the comedian, pointed out, it's a strange worry to have because we know that the demographic trends are going towards population increase rather than population decrease, let alone population collapse. So every time he talks about the risk of population collapse, you kind of wonder what is he talking about? And I've always had, because like I said again, I subscribe to that premise that I spent a significant part of the video explaining, like early in the video. That's well, there was something that he's trying to tell to some people uh, between the lines, right? And that recent speech, I mean, just it's just lays it out, right? It's so basically the gist of the speech was, I guess I could just go ahead and cite him, which was a people is not the geography. Sorry, a country is not its geography. It's people. I mean, first of all, like this is just blood and soil, right? I gotta say, I would respect him a bit more if he just owned to his shitty ideas. But no, if you ask him, I'm sure that he will. If you show him the corollary or the implications of the things that he's saying, he will probably deny without even trying to. And what's particularly annoying with him is that he will just deny and not even try to give like an alternative explanation. He would just be like, "Oh no, I didn't. That's not what I meant," and then move on. But anyways, so that notion is wrong, and I will explain it by using an example that he gave himself during that speech, which was the example about. So if I rephrase it, it was if you take. I hope I can cite him correctly, or at least paraphrase him correctly. And it was if you take a group of Italians and teleported them from Italy to America, that part of America where they would be teleported to would cease to be America and would become Italy. Obviously, that is just a stupid thing to say, right? I mean, first of all, there does exist parts of the United States that are more heavily populated by some ethnicities or nationalities than others, right? Or than surrounding areas. But that doesn't make them a open quotation that ethnicity hyphen stan, right? So I mean, cities that are heavily populated uh, that by Black Americans, for example, whether we're talking about African Americans or Caribbeans or Africans or whatever. So Black Americans, in short, they do not become Nigeria's then, or little Jamaica, or little Ghana, or whatever. No, they are still America. Those people, if they have the citizen, assuming they have citizenship, are Americans, and them being from a particular part of the world has nothing to do with the de-Americanization of that region, that geography that they occupy, right? I mean, this is just obvious. Again, this is the reality at the moment for many cities across the United States, right? Or if we want to go more granular and zoom in, we would say parts of cities, right? We know that some parts of some cities are more inhabited by Italians or by French or by Dutch people or by Jamaican people or Nigerian people, those kind of things. But those parts remain American. Those people remain American, and that's in part because of that melting pot attribute of the United States, right? The United States is one of the most successful countries when it comes to assimilating immigrants, right, into the American culture, right? And one of the ways it does that is by giving, so the community that welcomes those immigrants shows them what it is to be American, but in return, the American community will absorb some of what makes those people that people, right? So this is why you find yourself with things like Tex-Mex cuisine, right? It comes from that exchange between quote unquote gringo cuisine and native Mexican cuisine, and it creates something new, right? And I can give so many examples of things that are considered to be part of American culture that are the result of that dialectic between two cultures, namely the culture of the immigrants and the culture of the environment that he finds himself in. So that reality, which is an American reality, just destroys that idea that if you teleport people from some part of the world and you ship them, you teleport them to some part of the country, then that part of the country ceases to be American. This is just absurd, and it betrays a complete lack of understanding of, or even knowledge, I think it's fair to say, of American culture and of American history, right? So that is Exhibit B, and then you have Exhibit C, which, I mean, to me is even more straightforward. Again, like we started with I mean, the more we are going into these examples, I think the less the magnitude of the gap to be crossed by a leap, right? So basically, the leap provided by Exhibit B is less large than the one provided by Exhibit B, and so forth, right? So in Exhibit B, the point was that it's just a blood and soil argument. I mean, that argument is it's an argument for America to cease to receive people from, because we know where this is going, right? I mean, this might be the first step for him, and then it's gonna be, because what's gonna follow from that is that while some cultures actually de-Americanize America more than others, and then obviously, like, we know where it's gonna go. Like the only the European cultures are close enough, and then, well, therefore we should limit immigration from the rest of the world, from South America, from Asia, although Elon seems to not have a problem with Asia, but because they provide him with cheap labor, by the way. I'm sure that he would still have a problem with them on an ethnic basis, but yeah, and obviously Africa and the Middle East and and so forth. So yeah, so that completes Exhibit B, and then Exhibit C is the you have said the actual truth incident on Twitter. So if you remember a few months ago, Elon, who tweets what hundreds of times a day on average. I mean, lately he's just been going at it, which is ironic for somebody that fires government worker on the basis that they do not work enough. I mean, have you seen how much time this guy spends on Twitter? But anyways, so there was a guy. So I think, if I remember correctly, there was an incident involving a Jewish woman as the victim and an immigrant man as the perpetrator, right? And there was a commentary from one of these right-wing bots, which was just an idiotic thing. Again, I mean, fascism in general, it's not a very smart ideology. You have to ignore a lot in order to be a fascist, and as a result, oftentimes what you end up producing as a thought ends up being idiotic. Some Twitter user commented on the incident by saying basically Jewish people, right? So I'm paraphrasing him here. Jewish people, the Jews have built culture, right? Presumably through their control of of the levels of culture. They have uh, they have taught American society that they should be more welcoming of immigrants, and that foreigners were good people and or people in general. And now look at them now with their paying for it by being the victims of the very people that they helped promote through their control on the levels of culture. So, first of all, I mean, just that comment by itself, I just want you to not lose sight of that, is predicated on this anti-Semitic idea that Jews do, in fact, control the levels of culture. Right? Just straight up anti-Semitic idea, right? Like, it is the matrix for such anti-Semitic ideas as the idea that Jews control the media, right? They control finance, right, which allows them to in turn control media, right? I mean, this is like protocol of the elders of Zion shit, right? That they do decide what's gonna be trendy and non-trendy in smoke-filled backrooms, while laughing in an evil fashion about what they are going to impose to the goyim. I mean, in order to make that comment, first of all, like you just have to believe in that idea, right? Only once you've adhere to that idea can you make this type of comments, right? But obviously, coming from those random Twitter users, I mean, we all know what Twitter has become. It's just become Nazi central. So, unfortunately, it's not even uncommon to see those kind of putrid ideas, right, being expressed. But on that idea, on that comment in particular, there was a premium Twitter user, right? A pristine user, Elon Musk, that retweeted or quote tweeted that tweet that was commenting on that incident, and with a very simple sentence: "You have said the actual truth." Open quotes. I repeat: "You have said the actual truth." Close the quotations. So that idea, which again is predicated, like I've told you, like I just told you, one of the oldest and most anti-Semitic ideas that a person can hold, and you have Elon Musk that comes in and he doesn't just do his usual, oh, interesting, oh, wow. He 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 he, he gives it credibility and his full support by saying, "You have said the actual truth." Right? I don't know. Should I say more? I mean, doesn't that just confirm like this guy is retweeting and endorsing anti-Semitic discourse, right? And if you do remember, after he made that comment, he got into trouble because people were calling him out, and that was what prompted him to, a few days later, make that visit to Israel, right? We all remember that visit to Israel where he wore that bullet vest. So that's where it came from. It came from he was being called out, and because of that, he felt like he needed to do something particularly philo-Semitic by in order to offset the anti-Semitism of his statements, right? And I guess he according to his calculus, the best thing to do was to go and sort of give a show of support to the Israeli government, right? But I mean, that's it. That's a guy. So those ideas, and I hope I did a good job showing the basis of the ideas that's behind some of the behind the statements that he made in every of the example that I gave you. And those ideas are clearly white supremacist and Nazi ideas, right? There is an overlap, right? Or there are overlaps, and that was the point of my demonstration. And those are ideas. I mean, I could have given a lot more examples, right? I could have just gone through his Twitter feed and start picking at each of his tweets who is responding to the kind of ideological makeup of the people that he responds to and interacts with on Twitter. But I think those three examples that I gave speak for themselves, right? So that is, to me, because there was an overlap between the core of those obscure ideologies and the ideas that he felt comfortable enough to express in public. Because remember, as per our premise established at the beginning of the video, it would be naive to wait for Elon to tell us that he believes in those ideas. But we know that this is a sketchy man with a family with a sketchy history when it comes to those kind of dark ideologies. I mean, you basically have in his family the intersection between apartheid and Nazism. I mean, this is insane, right? And obviously, I'm not saying that's coming from a family that believes that believe in those ideas, or even have acted on those ideas, is in and of itself a condemnation, right? Obviously, people can change. People are not defined by what their family did decades or centuries before them. But in his case, we can actually see the traces of his beliefs in those ideologies that his family has been swimming in, right? And so this is my demonstration that this guy, Elon Musk, is just a Nazi. So that's it for that episode. Thank you for having listened to my ramble. I hope to see you soon, and I hope to be making those kind of videos, podcasts more regularly. But yeah, thank you for having listened to me.